Hey everybody, it's your pal Drew Dracy, and I'm back again already with my new camera. As many of you know, I was a Marvel zombie up until the early 80s. A little at a time, did I get into, first DC. You had George Perez, Marvel Wolfman, doing a fantastic job on New Teen Titans. You had Fury of Firestorm with Pat Broderick. You had Gene Colan and others going over to DC, so it was sort of a bleed that would kind of lead me into some of the DC books, and then later on there was first comics and then a bunch of indie books. But I was a big collector. I was a Marvel zombie, tried and true. I mean, I really, if I saw, I just wasn't into DC books. Like when I was a kid, if I saw a Marvel comic, I'd have to have it. But if I'm at somebody's house and they had a DC book, I wouldn't pick it up. But that's how narrow-minded I was. I was full Marvel zombie. So, but there came a point where I'm still collecting, but I was getting less satisfied. And in general, I feel like around 1984, give or take, is when I tapped out of a lot of books that I had been buying for years and years and years. And I think Secret Wars, the first one, in my opinion, is where Marvel jumped the shark. But there are a lot of people who have great memories of Secret Wars. I'll get into that in a little bit. But one of the results from Secret Wars, we're going to start right here, is The Thing, who had his own co-starring book for 100 issues. There was The Thing and Golem, The Thing and Spider-Man, The Thing and Power Man and Iron Fist. And I enjoyed it. The first 75 issues was great. It lasted till 100, and it got really blah. And I love the character, so but I kept buying it. And then issue 100 came out, and I had no idea what was going to happen. Then all of a sudden, John Byrne decided to start The Thing from issue 1, his own title for the first time ever. And I thought it was okay. Byrne being on board definitely helped. He and Ron Wilson worked together pretty well, and the first 10 issues or so pretty good, but during the Secret Wars, they did a time flip which was clever, like where 1 month all the major characters go into this dimension, and then they come out the next month. For example, Spider-Man got his black costume. He goes in with red and blue, and then he comes out the next issue with the black costume. So it's supposed to be what happened in the year that had passed while they were away. It was a whole year, and it was a great idea. I just was dissatisfied with some of the results. Spider-Man was great because you had DeFalco and Rod and Friends kicking ass. But The Thing had to go through a year worth of these Rocky Grim Space Ranger stories. I grew up, when I was a kid, taking my comics way too seriously, and then I found humor in a lot of stuff, and I've read a lot of comics that were fit for adults and children, but this part really struck me as juvenile, overly juvenile. Like, I've had a discussion with friends about the Star Wars movies, like the original 3 from the 70s and early 80s, is Star Wars to me, and then, like, the prequels they were juvenile, and that's something the first Star Wars movies weren't. It was to be, enjoyed by everybody. So this Ben Grimm finds out on the Secret Wars battle world that the Beyonder created that he could change back and forth to Ben Grimm and The Thing when needed. It just like a superhero, and he did that because he was having some problems with Alicia. He was uncertain about the future of them together. So he decides to do this, and I bought the first issue, and I'm like, Then I looked through issue 12, looked through issue 13 on the stands, and said, nope. So that was one of the books I just cut loose. It helped that it was an early issue, too, so it wasn't like it lasted 3 years, and towards the end it actually got pretty decent, but no. Now, here we go. Captain America and the Sisters of Sin. Ooh. This was a really weird period. J.M. DeMatteis was still writing the book after Mike Zeck left with issue 389, and it was pretty good for a couple of issues. And then they had a one-armed Devil Slayer character, and Paul Neary took over in the art. And he's not flashy, he's not special, his stuff's not cool, but he is a great storyteller, and that's half the battle. I mean, although when Image came along, it didn't matter what the storytelling was. So at this point, I thought, oh, it's so dumb. And issue 300 had Cap fighting the Red Skull for the very last time. They both had this aging ray or serum that they had drunk, and they were fighting to the death, and they were getting withered old men, and it was just awful. And it ended, issue 300 ended a very, not the way James DeMatteis wanted to. He wanted this character, this Native American character, to take over the mantle of Captain America, but he was poo-pooed on that. Not poo-pooed, but was not approved. So it languished for about 6 months or so. Mike Carlin did some cool stories, and then Mark Gruenwald began his 100-issue run. It was really cool. Most of it with Paul Neary, but it's in the story too. I will take average art as long as the story is great, but this really got so I skipped it, and I came back, I don't know, like issue 310 or like a couple issues into Mark Gruenwald's. Down here saying, whoa, hey, no, whoa. The Avengers, I always loved them, and Eros, who is Thanos' brother, he comes from Captain Marvel, the Kree Marvel that Jim Starlin has established, and he became an Avenger named Star Fox. That's because Janet Van Dyne, who finally did have a new hairstyle for a while, I had complained about that in a previous episode, and I'm just like, she called him, she says, well, you're from the stars and you're kind of foxy, let's call you Star Fox. And it's like, woo-wee, it's dumb. But here's the other thing too. Hawkeye's going to leave soon, and she's the new person on the block. But the rest of them know Eros, at least the three, classic Avengers. I just thought he just didn't do anything for me. I mean, he had his roofie power where he can activate your pleasure centers, which, didn't age well. But then since then, he flies and has some modicum of super strength. So what? And then he went from being a happy-go-lucky guy to just a straight man. So I really disliked the oncoming of Star Fox. I picked up a couple issues later when Spider-Man guest starred, and it was still that was about it. And they kept him like for years and years and years. And I just think he's better off on with Mentor on Titan, hanging out, with Isaac the computer, not the bartender at the Love Boat. So that really let me down. Now, as for the X-Men, here we go. Need I say more? Al Milgrom does do great layouts. And sometimes when he's inking others, he does good stuff, like when he inked Ron Friends on Thor when Joe Sinnott retired. But I don't know why, but he got the pencil and ink himself for the 6-issue Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. And this is very early in the miniseries era. The first one was Wolverine, and there was Bob Layton's Hercules, and there were a couple on the way in between. But it just... I'm sorry, it's just awful. And like I said, the layouts are solid, but the finishes with the layouts, it just really looks... It really stepped down from what the high watermark X-Men art was in storytelling. And what happens also is Kitty Pryde starts off as this innocent, 14-year-old or whatever. She gets, this devil mask guy decides to. I think he's from the Hand. I don't know, but he basically tortures her and breaks her down to where she becomes a ninja. Chop the hair, all that stuff. And the thing is, there's no follow through. Like later, for like an issue or two of X-Men, there is mention of it, but she comes back the way she arrived, and she would not be the happy-go-lucky person she was. She would be the sensitive person. She would be like, she would be very mean-spirited and hard to get along with after something like that, because that's just not something you shake off. So this really sucked. I bought the whole thing because I was still buying all things X-Men, but then it got really ridiculous with like Beauty and the Beast, which was just Dazzler and the Beast. I totally skipped that. They were doing more and more stuff. They did Magic, which was Storm and Ileana, whatever her name is, from Colossus' sister. It just started getting, the X title started to get shitty, and the regular X title, I quit X-Men with issue 200 because there were so many issues in a row where they would start off with dream sequences. I mean, after like several issues in a row of that, there would also be fights with other teams, whether it's the Freedom Force and all this stuff. Never no conclusions to the fights. It would always be like the police arrive or some other events happening, and then Wolverine would be like, "Next time, bub." So I felt jerked around like, can you give us a clear win, guys? It's like, can you give us a clear win? It was so unsatisfying on that level. So when issue 200 happened and Magneto, I love John Romita Jr., but that costume for issue 200 is just absurd. It looks like somebody just woke up out of bed. It's like some mom's nightgown with an M on it. So this is where the crack started. I did buy all these issues, and like I said, as I saw more and more X product coming out, that's when I decided I'll tap out. And then the book really wandered for a while, but it got pretty good again. Now, Hulk at the Crossroads, issue 300, which was after years of Bruce Banner the Hulk having Bruce Banner's brain, his full scientific knowledge for years. You knew it was going to be a regression. That's just a given because it's the Hulk. Issue 300 had the whole Marvel Universe attacking him, and Doctor Strange, as a way of, in a merciful fashion of dealing with the Hulk, he sent it to this dimension known as the Crossroads. And I never saw the issue. And was there an issue where like he was given a guitar if he sold his soul to go on the Crossroads? I don't know. But however, the Sal Buscema art was really good. He decided to do full pencils at the time, and Gary Talek was a perfect inker for him. I picked up a couple issues into this, and it was morality plays. Every issue was self-contained pretty much, and it was just the same old morality plays. But this went on for a whole friggin' year, man. It was like 301 through 312 plus an annual, I think. But the annual was out of no. The annual was part of it as well. And then John Byrne came, and like a lot of people, I showed up again, and then Byrne left, and like a lot of people, I left. So that's when I started buying Hulk. I mean, I love the Hulk so much. I mean, you had the same team, Bill Mantlo and Sal Buscema, doing some great stuff with, starting in like issue 360 something, and but at this point, I didn't like the Hulk being segregated from the Marvel Universe, one thing, but then second of all, it just became, it should have just been a few issues. So here we go. Peter Parker, Spectacular Spider-Man. It's a book I never really liked. Like the first 3 years I thought were very pedestrian. They were just there to have another Spider-Man book, and the creative teams wandered back and forth, and there was a reprint in issue 6. It was just a real dodgy start, but people loved Spider-Man so much they would buy this second book, the only second book of that timeline with Spider-Man. There was also Marvel Team Up, which had Spider-Man, but then it was also Spidey Super Stories, which was a children's version in tandem with the Electric Company. and there was Marvel Tales that reprinted old stories. So this was the first solo Spider-Man since the original series, and Bill Mantlo and Ed Hannigan did a fantastic job, and then it became Bill Mantlo and Alan Milgrom, and it was good for a while. I mean, like issue 79, where Spider-Man defeats Dr. Octopus decisively, like in the biggest way possible. It was great, but then Al Milgrom decided he was going to write as well as draw, and he could write, that's fine. But it really just kind of, this wasn't excitement. This wasn't the Marvel excitement that we had earlier. Had earlier in the decade. This is a character called The Answer, and apparently he's just this. He's slightly superpowered, but he's figured out everything. I guess this is before they came up with the idea of Batman, like planning every single thing about a battle, or if he has to tussle with his own teammates and such. But he really should have taken down in no time with Spider-Man. Spider-Man just defeated the Juggernaut a couple of years earlier, defeated Fire-Lord around this time, and this goof who thinks he knows everything is going to be... That's when it really started getting crappy. I like, there was an issue earlier, too, where the Blob was the bad guy that was fun, but this is when the book really was going to shit. And then issue 100... I dropped it with this. I dropped this like he was going to drop one of them. Another thing, too. So dumb. I mean, even if it was an old story, Black Cat, who didn't have any powers aside from agility and breaking in and entering, she had no power, so she went to the Kingpin, and the Kingpin knew somebody who could give her superpowers, and she got bad luck powers, like a black cat crossing your path. And it was so dumb to me because, I mean, for one thing, that's something that would be almost like a mystical thing. It wouldn't be something you could create with chemicals or machinery. And another thing is, if the Kingpin's providing this, why doesn't the Kingpin do it? It's like, here, take all these powers that are really going to give you an advantage, and, I'll just hang back. And there was no firm reason why that didn't happen. So it just got kind of after a while. I just felt like, I'm going to bail. So I had bailed on Peter Parker earlier, like in the mid-40s or something like that. So Daredevil 200, I had mentioned this on my previous episode of why it failed so miserably. Frank Miller left issue 191. Denny O'Neil and Alan Zelenez with Klaus Janson did several outstanding issues, because Klaus was doing the lion's share of the artwork at that point over Miller's layouts. Then the new guy came along, William Johnson, and he was solid. I actually, I was bummed, but I actually was giving him a chance because, I'm sorry, okay, he's not Frank Miller. He could tell a story, and that's okay. This is a John Byrne cover, by the way, Byrne and Austin. But the interiors, as I said in a previous episode, it just sucked because issue 181, I got to stir the sauce. Hold on. Okay, sauce is officially stirred. My wife's making her mother's meat sauce, and next time I'll be making my mom's meatless sauce with meatballs on the side. So it's 6 one, half dozen the other. So by the time this issue came along, they built up this bullseye thing again, and I'm going to try and truncate it. Issue 181 was a tough fight between, like, very close to death for both combatants, and what happened is he refused to be saved by Daredevil and fell like several stories down onto the pavement and crushed every bone in his body. Just like 2 years later, he gets an adamantium body, and he's deadly as ever. Daredevil has a cast, and he beats him even easier than he does in 200. it didn't mean a thing. It was so, I don't even know if, I think Denny O'Neil, maybe he was nudged to do, oh, we go issue 200, Frank Miller's not here, but we still got Bullseye. We gotta, it was just awful, and William Johnson he did do his best, but he wasn't given much to work with. So that's when the book sucked. I came back a little before Born Again, because I saw David Mazzucchelli, start to develop as an artist. So that sucked. Power and Iron Fist. I love this book. I picked it up when Kerry Gamble and Mary Jo Duffy did the book, and really loved it. It was just a great, buddy comedy, action romp. Well, Mary Jo Duffy, she went on to assist Archie Goodwin on the Epic series that they had. The first issue was Dreadstar, second was Coyote, Six from Sirius, a whole bunch of Epic comics that she helped. She was very involved with the Akira series that was translating the original comic that became the awesome movie, and that was like 34 issues, like square-bound in it. So she did a lot of that, but when she left, the fun really left. Denny O'Neil came along, and he does do streetwise or street level heroes well, but these were all individual issues, and it just seemed like Denny was bored with it. I really got a feeling he was bored with it. I can't quite describe it, because I was getting bored, and I'm an open-minded guy, and I like Denny O'Neil's stuff on a lot of other stuff, but I chalk it up to he's a DC writer, and that's where his passions lay, and that's it. So, woo! That's a neat little cover. It's Art Adams, early Art Adams with Al Milgrom, and it's pretty cool. Like I said, I like Milgram's inks on. This isn't a very good scan, I apologize. But the only thing is, at this point, the book was really just running thin. The stories were just getting really, again, like with Marvel 2-in-1, it was almost like they had to do it. It was like a service. It's like, oh, well, we got to keep these running. And you really got no sense of importance. And the only sense of importance this issue had was because it had the black costume. So, it's basically a cheap tie-in. So, Doctor Strange. The issue before this was Roger Stern and Paul Smith, and then later on, I think Secret Wars 2, for one thing, really pissed me off in a lot of ways, because Beyonder was in every friggin' comic that Marvel came out that month. Now, I'm not against, but Mark Badger, fantastic artist. I've sung his praise many times, but Peter Gillis just doesn't grab me for some reason. I want to like his stuff, but it just doesn't grab me. And I liked him much more when he was doing What Ifs, because he could go wild with it, the concepts. But between that and the fact that I was spoiled by Roger Stern and Paul Smith, that's when I bailed. And I came back around issue 5 of the second series, or is it the third, with Roy Thomas and Butch Guice. A lot of this was well done. Just I'm not a real big Peter Gillis dude. Just a month. But there's people who don't like my stuff, so that's okay. We're all entitled to our opinions. Oh boy, this is when Doug Mensch and Alan Kupperberg took over Thor for a while. Doug Mensch wrote. Let me think. He started on a couple issues after issue 300, and he made Thor's battles Earthbound. And, so he was having the Wrecking Crew and all these other characters, and the Bi Beast, who I always thought was kind of cool, created by Herb Trimpe and I think Steve Englehart, I don't know. And I liked that because Keith Pollard's art really sold it, and Iron Man teamed up with Thor one time, and then when Keith Pollard left, Alan Kupperberg, God rest his soul, he passed away recently, but I associate him with being king of the fill-ins, because he did a lot of stuff that was almost there but not quite, and even this is kind of odd. And I know I'm being a dick, making fun of someone else's, work, but his stuff was always like a little off, and like people would kind of stumble into a scene, or I can't think of it, but it just got not only that, but these characters are lame. They're awful, and the story was pretty mediocre. What happened was Doug Mensch took over, and then he did okay for about a year. He had Dr. Don Blake actually practice he practiced medicine in Chicago, which was pretty cool. So you had like a good year on that, and then after that, this happened, and then they did another Ragnarok that was so same old, same old. And I did return when Simonson did, as did a lot of other fans, but this was like, again, this is like tearing away at my fandom because a lot of mediocrity happened. Okay, by issue 6, I was halfway through the miniseries, as of course. The book was so unsatisfying. It starts off, well, that's a Bob Layton cover, but the first 2 issues, there's a lot of great panels by Mike Zeck and John Beatty, and then another issue or 2, it's still strong, but you see it getting thinner and like it weakens. And my understanding of it was, instead of having big brawls, the kind of like John Buscema would have with the foreshortening, where somebody punches someone and so he goes back that way, it really was so much of the book had mid-range panels. Like I had shown that on my other channel, there was a comic called The Shadow, but it was The Shadow in name only. It was a corny superhero character. Every panel was like mid. It was mid. How can I put it? It didn't pop out at the panel. Like a John Buscema, How to Do Comics the Marvel Way, or the Walt Simonson bombast and all that. It just would look like a bunch of toy soldiers. And my understanding is that Shooter made constant, redrawings, constant changes along the way, because they got the numbers for issue 1, and it sold crazy high numbers. So everybody I've known who known Jim Shooter at the time said that was the point where he believed he was solely the reason for the greatest book coming out. It was his writing, not the fact that you have all these Marvel characters together at the same time in their first big event outside of Contest of Champions, which sort of doesn't count. I don't know. I mean, so anybody could have written it. I would have rather Bill Mantlo write it, or anybody, but it just had these skirmishes, and there was a lot of petty squabbling. I don't mind a little bit, but there was quite a bit, and it felt so. It seemed less and less important, and so I actually hung in there. I'm like, I'm halfway committed. Let's see how it shakes out. And it's, it's okay, I guess. But at the end, there was a double-sized issue. I think it was 10 or it was 12. But at the end, you had Butch Geist and you had Arthur Adams doing some pages to help out finish the book. But extremely satisfying. It's kind of like a lot of empty calories. Great characters, great covers. But, Spider-Man. Man, I got back on board with when Roger Stern and John Romita did Spider-Man. I picked up a few John Romita Spider-Mans earlier, and they were okay, but it wasn't until, actually, excuse me, I think when, again, Denny O'Neil, he kind of did each issue as a, just, I don't know why Denny O'Neil just didn't. In my opinion, he wasn't into Marvel books that he did. He was a really good editor, and this has nothing to do with him. So Spider-Man, for years now, by this time, Roger Stern and John Romita Jr. did, first did an issue of the Vulture that actually gave him an origin, like in issue 224 or so. And the book got better and better, and then they introduced the Hobgoblin, which instead of the Green Goblin, it was somebody who picked up on the Legacy long story. And then after issue 250, Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz took over for Spider-Man, and it took me an issue or 2 to adjust to it, and then I fell in love with it. It was a different feel, but it was a fantastic. It was just as good, comparably, in my opinion. So the Hobgoblin came and went, and they did this constant like who done it. And originally, way back when, it was supposed to be Ned Leeds, according to Roger Stern, and the editor was first it was Jim Salicrup, I think, and then Christopher Priest, aka Jim Owsley, took over, and he was 22 years old, and his mentor was Jim Shooter, who was basically saying, we'll bust the creators' balls and keep doing it till you get the very best out of them. And they would have these meetings, these Spider-Man meetings, summits, and they would say, okay, well, the Amazing Spider-Man, the Hobgoblin, he's that Roderick Kingsley guy, and they've been building all the way up to it, and then just to be a contrarian, Jim Owsley said, nope, that's not him. So as a reader, it was so frustrating, and I left. I was like, oh, okay, they're gonna say it's this guy, because I got tired of getting jerked around. And there's a channel called Comics Tropes where Chris gives a really good breakdown of what happened from making the Hobgoblin cool to being a constant pain in the ass that kind of annoys you with the identity switching. You just felt jerked around. You felt like, oh, well, let's just drag this out longer. But they learned from their lesson eventually. So, until the Clone Saga of the 90s. Oof, boy, oh boy, that was dreadful. Chris also covered that as well. But this is it. A beautiful Tom Morgan cover. He was a Ramita. Here we go, Morgan Rubenstein. He was a Ramita Raider, which was one of the many interns who worked around John Ramita to learn how to do things the Marvel way. And he did about a year on Iron Man that I really liked. And I think he's doing animation now, but he does these daily drawings during his lunch break. That's just so magnificent, And he even did me an Iron Man piece that I like. But yeah, I was done. By this time I was done. And so Marvel was chipping away. It was losing me as a longtime fanboy. And it wasn't that I didn't like change. I didn't like how things were things were turning into sausage. You just put it out there, and it was just very unsatisfying. You could tell the quality was suffering. And I know you can't sustain quality all the time, although Amazing Spider-Man did it for a lot of years, so the Fantastic Four, but this was just too much. It was my breaking point, and a lot of other people's too, from what I understand. I didn't come back until issue 301 or 302 with Michelini and that new guy, Todd McFarlane, who I had read in Incredible Hulk. And those issues were fun. David Michelini was just a great writer for the whole decade, I think. Tom DeFalco is a great writer as well, and Ron Frenz is a great artist, but they got jerked around. They got screwed with. And I think they eventually just quit because, and I've said before that Christopher Priest / Jim Owsley has a blog where he has profusely apologized for doing this sort of thing. But he was just young. He was too young to be an editor, he says, and he was just being a ball buster because he was told to be. And that's it. That's if you could think of other eras that make you decide to quit a book, you don't even have to say Marvel. I'm just using Marvel because that was my main interest. But so if I drop a Marvel book, then I'm likely to pick up a DC book or shell out a little more money for an independent book. But, tell me, what was your jump the shark moment? Just reviewing this. I went down to the crossroads. This is one of those things that, it almost isn't canon, because that whole ninja thing kind of went by the wayside almost immediately, and Awful. Sorry, Star Fox lovers. The Sisters of Sin. Sounds like a disco band. Rocky Grim Space Ranger bids you goodbye, dear reader. Because I'm never coming back. Okay, that's about it. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you think I'm full of baloney. If you love Secret Wars, that's okay. You know, I'm not going to down on you for... Everybody has their own tastes. That's my... that's what I live by. So give me a holler. And please leave tons of compliments. I love to read what other people... I really enjoy it. It's just... We're all here for the love of comics, and it's like a community that we're just, we're just teenage fanboys all over again. And anytime I look at, some older comics, and when I'm working on comics, I still think like, wow, this is great stuff. Comics are just a fantastic medium. And that's it, everybody. Ooh, excuse me, sneeze. Talk to you later. Bye.